Welcome back to the Compost Pile, where we're breaking down everything you need to be successful in Zone 9A. I'm your host, David, and I want to take a moment to step away from talking about all the specific plants that we normally talk about and maybe gardening as a specific topic and focus on something that every garden, every homestead, every farm, and honestly, every homeowner really depends on to sustain life. Water. We talked about water last week and we're back for part 2. And in this episode, we're going to talk about just overall the importance of water. Now, I know it doesn't sound like a very interesting topic. At first, we all know that plants, chickens, livestock, people, ourselves need water to be able to survive. But I don't think we spend enough time thinking about where it comes from and what happens when we don't actually have it on a consistent basis. Do we actually have a plan to retain water? This is a very core principle in permaculture, and that's retaining water on your property. Obviously, we want excess water to move on, but we've got to retain moisture. So let's dive in and talk about everything we want to know about water and expand from last week's topic on rain and the impacts that it has on the homestead and our property as gardeners. When most people picture a homestead, they picture garden beds, chickens, livestock, fruit trees, all the things that make it enticing, that we want to use or that we already maybe go out and buy. We're like, we can create these things on our own, we can harvest them, and we can do it right here on our own property. Rarely do we picture gutters, ditches, rain barrels, catchment systems, swells as part of that system for growing things that we want to keep on the homestead or just simply keeping livestock alive. And because of that, I would argue that before you ever plant your first vegetable or fruit tree, that you should really take a deep dive into water and understand where it comes from and how we can utilize it most efficiently on the property before it becomes scarce. I think one of the biggest mindset shifts is moving away from thinking that water is something that we can just turn on and that it's always there. I know in Texas, we're starting to see areas where water's becoming scarce, like the Corpus Christi area. Here in the Southeast Texas coastal region, water isn't as scarce, but it could become that way at any point in time. So we have to look at water not as just something we turn on a valve and it's always available to us. Instead, we want to think about this as our homestead's most valuable resource, because without water, none of us can survive. It makes everything so much more difficult. Whether we think about it or not, every single day of the week, we're using water for something. We're using it to water the garden, fill livestock troughs. We are washing produce. We're showering. We're washing our hands. We are cleaning things around the house. We can't accomplish that without water and not be sanitary, be safe, and actually be healthy. We're using it to mix fertilizers, wash tools. So it's an integral part of just maintaining aspects of the homestead. It also is absolutely important for the soil food web. Without it, we can't have compost. We can't have healthy soil. So it's, no matter where you turn, water is there. It's right in our face, and we can't do anything without it. Most of us are fortunate where water is at the turn of a knob or a faucet, and it's super accessible, and we can water the garden, and we can accomplish any of the above tasks that I talked about. No problem at all. But until we reach a point where we have a boil water notice, maybe if we're somewhere where we rely on pumps to move water, there's no electricity, there's no backup power system, or maybe we're in a hurricane where water is no longer safe to drink, or water can be contaminated. What are we doing? what systems do we have in place in the homestead to be able to combat this and be prepared. And while this particular climate is characteristically very wet and we get lots of rainfall, there are times where we have droughts. And those droughts can go on for extended periods of time. They can create burn bans, but more importantly, they can create water restrictions. There are times when a common homeowner is watering their lawn and restrictions are put in place to preserve water. We have to keep these things in mind because there could be a time when it comes when we have water restrictions, and that could affect our garden beds. That could affect our fruit trees. It could affect ground covers, large trees in the landscape, which are doing a vital job for us. The reality is that water security isn't about preparing for disaster. It's about preparing for preserving what we actually want to accomplish on the homestead, as well as preparing for a disaster. Water conservation is becoming one of the largest topics in the green industry. As a landscaper, it becomes a topic of discussion and education almost at every conference that we attend, because it's not infinite. Another thing to consider when it comes to water is not all water has the same job. Some water is for drinking, some water is for irrigating crops. Some water is used on lawns, some is used for fruit trees. We have to really think about the quality of the water and where we're putting that quality water. The highest quality water doesn't need to be used in every facet of the garden. Truthfully, drinking water that we might get from a faucet that is deemed safe for us is not really the best water to put on fruit trees. It might not be the best water to put in a garden bed. They have things in it, like we've mentioned before, that help break down contaminants, bacterias, fungi that might otherwise be vitally important to being successful in the homestead. Rainwater, we know, is often better, as we talked about last episode, and that already oxygenated water that also carries atmospheric nitrogen is often better for most of the plants that we're putting out. So one thing to consider is, am I using the highest quality water where it matters? I could be using well water that might not be deemed good enough for drinking right out here in the garden and getting far superior results, because that well water might be fortified with minerals and other nutrients that otherwise might not be found in tap water. Now, we've kind of mentioned a little bit about not having enough water, and while this could become a growing concern as the years move on, right now, water here in this particular area is pretty abundant. Sometimes it's too much, and that leads me to one of the most important things that is overlooked in homesteading, and something I learned about in my permaculture studies, and that's about what do we do with all the excess water? Where does it go? What impact does it make? We touched a little bit about on some of these aspects in our rainwater episode, but let's dive in a little bit more. So we all know that we can go from the perfect amount of rain and water falling on the landscape or the homestead to too much in a matter of minutes. In a matter of an hour, we can go from 1 inch to 10 inches even here. And that water begins to saturate the soil. It begins to fill up your beds. There's no more room in the soil pores to hold that moisture. Then it begins to run off. It's moving into drainage systems. It begins to disappear. And yeah, we don't want standing water everywhere, but we need to design our homesteads with water in mind. We want to retain water. We want to replenish the water table that is beneath us. And how we do that is really important. We can do that by good soil practices. We are slowly making changes from having heavy clay soil to soils that are more porous, that can let more water infiltrate in, replenish the water table, and promote healthier, deeper growing root systems. We also have to consider when we're dealing with heavy amounts of rain, we don't want water sitting in places. That leads to unwanted pests like mosquitoes, which can bring on a health hazard. And they tell us a lot about our soil. It tells us, do the beds drain too quickly? Does it disappear too quickly? Does it hold too much water? Is it staying wet for days on end? We want that water to move away in a timely fashion, but at the same time, we want it to drain in and get to the water table. This will help us in times of drought, whereas other properties that might not be following good soil practices and might not be being soil conscious, their soil in a drought becomes cracked, it becomes stressed, nutrient deficient, and in turn, the plants, the ground covers, the trees all suffer around it. Creating healthy soil is actually water storage. Most people think when we talk about water storage that we're talking about cisterns, rain barrels, things that actually physically hold water. But the soil is actually our greatest soil storage facility, and it's the most overlooked. Healthy soil acts like a sponge. It soaks it up, it absorbs, it becomes a place for life. Whereas the common soils that we see here, clay, they become anaerobic. They fill up very quickly. Water runs off, and life becomes very difficult. Not everything can thrive in those soil conditions. So again, keeping yourself soil focused and making little improvements, small amounts, little each time, makes a massive difference when you're playing the long game on your soil. The soil is going to absorb the rainfall. It stores the moisture, and then it slowly releases it back to the roots of plants over time, whether it be large oak trees, whether it be small plants, like behind me here in the raised beds. This is one of the reasons why we talk so much about components of soil: organic matter, humic acids, carbons, microbes, mulch. All of these things are components that help build soil that can hold water longer, but while still draining exceptionally well. Healthy soil doesn't just grow better plants, it makes your property more resilient. So another part of conserving water on the homestead is about efficient use. I've learned that less water utilized more effectively is better than simply using more water. We often think, oh, we can just turn it on and we can get more, and then we can just keep watering these plants. Maybe by using drip irrigation, by being very intentional about where we're putting the water, putting it directly at the soil, reducing evaporation, reducing transpiration, just things that happen in the heat of the day and make this time of year here in July and August really hard to conserve water and to retain moisture, to get it deep into the root system. Deep watering encourages deeper roots. So if we can follow practices that will encourage that, ideally, the plants are going to be healthier. I talked a little bit about trees in our rainfall episode, talking about how they can help dissipate rainfall, which leads to compaction. But another thing that they do that we miss in a lot of, just places in the middle of town or growing gardens, we're missing the shade component. The shade component lowers the soil temperature. Lower soil temperatures lead to moisture retention, which in turn again leads to healthier plants. As we're setting up our property, and maybe before you plant the first thing, or maybe you have only part of your home set up, consider things such as windbreaks. Windbreaks could be done naturally by small to medium hedgerows. They can be done with small to medium trees. Those windbreaks act as a way to retain moisture. We know that if the wind is blowing over the same spot consistently, it dries the area out. And that's not conducive for growing small, delicate plants. So we can utilize other things on the homestead, whether it be man-made, Maybe we could use our chicken coop as a windbreak. We could be using plants as a windbreak. We can use fencing as a windbreak. All of these things can be used in conjunction with water retention planning. Another thing to consider is redundancy. If we put all of our eggs in one basket when we're growing vegetables and raised beds are in the ground, then we know that we can be far more prone to disease and pests. The same thing goes for water storage and water conservation. If we're consistently only relying on one source for water, such as municipal water, and something happens, then what do? All of our hard work could be gone within a matter of time, depending on the time of year. So building systems of redundancy. So we can have municipal water. We can have water storage tanks, even if we can only utilize that to store municipal water. That's fine. We have a backup plan. Rain harvesting systems. So using gutters, using roofs to be able to capture natural, higher quality water, which will go straight to fruit trees, vegetables, and flowering plants to make them the healthiest that they can be. In the event of an emergency, can we keep our animals watered for multiple days? Can we go 2-3 days? Can we go a week? Can we even go 1 day without the reliance on a water source that could go dry, whether it's a well, or become contaminated, such as a municipal system, and no longer be safe for drinking for animals and for ourselves? We don't have to have an elaborate off-grid system. We don't have to have solar-powered pumps. We have to start somewhere. So I encourage you, after maybe listening to this episode, if you've tuned in, to go out there and take a look. Is there even the smallest place that you could set up some form of water catchment? Maybe if you've got a chicken coop with a slanted roof, put a gutter on it, capture it into a drum. You'll fill that drum up incredibly fast and you won't have enough storage. But as with anything that we do as gardeners and homesteaders, we just have to start somewhere. If we don't start, we may never. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is creating options and just getting started with systems. One of the best things that you can do after a heavy rain is just walk your property. Look at the areas where water is moving really quickly. Look at areas where it's not moving at all. Look at areas where erosion is starting, where puddles are forming. Look where weeds are growing. There are so many weeds, even just in lawns, even in vegetable beds. Things like nutgrass, dollarweed. Those things can tell you so much about moisture in the soil. Take time, just like anything else, to go out and observe your surroundings and see what your property is telling you. Nature is giving back to us. Just like I mentioned in previous solo episodes where the garden is talking to us, it's giving us signs of what we can do to help it along the way. And water conservation on a property is really no different. Everything that we need to know is here in front of us. It's about how we go out there and we act and we experiment and we find what works for our each individual setting. The best time to problem solve before you encounter a water problem is honestly right now. We're moving into hurricane season here in Zone 9, and the unknown is upon us. Things change with a snap of a finger, and we have to be prepared. Other places, there's all kinds of natural disasters that happen in other parts of the country and the world, and people learn that resilience. They learn how to become prepared. My point being is that we want to prepare before the problem ever exists. So if you're not prone to dealing with common disasters or water issues, maybe like I am here, think ahead and solve those problems before they ever get here. Sometimes people look at other people and they're like, oh, these people are crazy. They're preparing for the worst when most likely nothing's going to happen. But it only takes that one time to not be prepared. And then failure begins. Go out there. Check your gutters. Are they cleaned if you're using them for water catchment? Even if you're not, Are they clean and allowing water to disperse away from areas that you don't want them, which might damage structures? That might bring on pests such as mosquitoes with holding water. Is our irrigation system, if we put in intentional irrigation and raised beds and around the area, are they actually functioning? Are they leaking? Do we have hose bibs that aren't functioning right? Do we have a plan for livestock? Think about how you're going to water the garden before you don't have water. Preparedness isn't panic. It's simply planning ahead. And in 2026, life's moving fast, and planning ahead on side activities, which gardening and a lot of homesteading practices for people in the middle of the city often are, they're not at the forefront of our mind. So planning ahead is never a bad practice. While I've learned a lot in my time in this industry and just growing things on my own, I've definitely found that I've learned the most from making mistakes. But I've definitely learned that success rarely comes from waiting for those mistakes. Mistakes teach us a lot of things, but a lot of the things that I get taught or I've been taught over my time and growing and keeping chickens are things that I could have prevented with just a little better planning. They weren't things that I needed some aha moment or some acclaimed expert to tell me. They were just things that I didn't put at the forefront and really think about. Success comes from paying attention to all elements of your homestead, not just the garden and not just the plants. It takes looking at sunlight, wind breaks, where water goes, where it disappears to, where it stays. All are things that make a huge impact on how we approach everyday activities. Water is one of those things we just overlook because most days it's at the turn of a knob until we don't. Or sometimes until we have too much, which here lately, there's been a heck of a lot of rain and it's definitely been too much. Either way, understanding how water moves across your property, how your plants use it, how your homestead depends on it, and how every aspect of what we do in homesteading relies on water will make us a better steward of the land and a resilient person that can help provide for our family. Because at the end of the day, I don't think water security is about having the biggest rain tank or the deepest well. It's about understanding your property and doing more observing and more preparation and less reactionary actions. We don't always have to be reacting to what's happening. We need to be looking, implementing one little change at a time that will improve something on your property. This is going to help us understand the next time the weather forecast calls for 3 weeks without rain and what to do when we get 3 to 6 inches before lunch today. It's going to help us become successful and do what we set out to do in the first place. And that's provide for ourselves, our homes, our families, and the people around us. I appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with me today. If this episode got you thinking about your own property a little differently, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what you've learned from your property. No matter whether it's about water conservation, whether it's about plants and things around you, it doesn't really matter. If you enjoyed today's conversation as well, don't forget to subscribe. And always thanks for spending time with us here on the Compost Pile. We'll catch you next time.